Who intervened most in Syria? It wasn't America, it wasn't Britain. It's Iran, Russia. It's, among others, countries, including the one we're in and others around the Gulf here.
Before we got to Syria, we had Iraq, we had Libya, we had many
countries
many
in this neck of the woods were much more involved in the Syrian civil war than my country was.
Well, you're also
so do you want to take some responsibility for that? Do you want to take more refugees here in Qatar? Do you want to take more in the Gulf?
No one.
Right.
Douglas Murray debates on Doha. How dare somebody debate Douglas Murray, if you ask me, when it comes to Israel-Palestine? For real. This man has taken his 2 feet. He has traveled all the way to the Middle East. He went into Khan Yunis. This man was 1 day after the Ukraine-Russia war started. He was in Kyiv. He was in Ukraine to go see and understand and witness and be a journalist, a boots-on-the-ground journalist. How dare people try to debate Douglas Murray? How dare people try to debate John Spencer? How dare? And that is why I always encourage you guys to be leaning into these kinds of people. We're going to take a listen to this video. I'm the other Barak. I'm coming to you live and direct here from the Holy Land. That subscribe button is on the button because it would mean the world if you could smash it right now so that you get notified. Make sure you press that bell icon. We put out 3 to 4 videos a day here. Let's get into it.
Is there an over-exaggeration, Douglas, do you think, in the West, this fear of Islam or anything that looks so different to us?
No, I mean, the society I'm from is one of the most pluralistic and diverse societies on earth. You couldn't get a larger range of people of different backgrounds and ethnicities and languages than you have in Britain.
And
which is why, once again, if I may push back against this thing you are pushing, which is that these are sort of uniquely bigoted, unwelcoming societies.
Not at all.
The evidence on this part of the stage would suggest that Britain is not.
When you said the developing world cannot move to the developed world, you seem to conveniently forget that the developed world moved to the developing world without asking permission.
No, I don't. I don't.
It seems to me as well that this is a particularly Western-centric viewpoint, and a misleading one at that, because you know as well as I do, and the figures show it, 85% of the world's refugees, in fact, settle in neighboring countries in the Middle East,
Sure.
in Africa and Asia. They do not rush over to Europe.
Sure. You'd make a big mistake if you think I hadn't heard of colonialism.
You don't seem to address it in any
I'd
way.
also suggest, by the way, that I don't know how long we're going to go on about colonialism for. I'm happy to do it as long as you like, but let me just.
Don't we have to be factful, though? Don't we have to be?
But also, don't think, if I may say so,
history.
that colonialism was just a Western thing. What was one of the largest and most significant empires in history, but the Ottoman Empire? Do we say that Turkey has to do something like the West to deal with
That's
Islam?
not the issue. You
brought up colonialism.
You are talking about the Western view that they.
By the way, today is your daily reminder that Turkey is still illegally occupying Cyprus. I repeat, it is November 5th, 2025. It is a daily reminder that Turkey, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not already heard, is still illegally occupying Cyprus.
Should stay where they belong.
I'm saying that it seems to me to be much wiser that if you have a very large humanitarian crisis in, for instance, Syria, you try to make sure that people remain in the area. This isn't say all of them, but it is more likely. I absolutely agree they do. I've seen it firsthand.
Look at Turkey, 3.5 million refugees. Look at Lebanon and Jordan per capita.
What
the
I'm
countries that have
suggesting
the
to you
most.
is,
in fact, in Lebanon, you've got 1 in every 4 person living in that country is a Syrian refugee.
Absolutely.
So to suggest they're not doing very much is just being misleading, being dishonest.
Believe me, I'm not being misleading. And I said from the outset that I agree with the point that most refugees remain in the area. And I said that I think that that's a good idea. I'm suggesting to you that I think it's better that people, for instance, fleeing Syria, end up in the countries around Syria in order to be able to return to their country than putting them in
but
Norway.
They will return. You are suggesting that they don't want to return. Who, in their right
I'm not
mind, if
suggesting
they
they
had
don't
the
want to
option,
return. When did I
and
say
we will
that?
hear from a refugee, if they had the option to return, of course they'd want to return.
I didn't say they wouldn't.
They leave everything behind. But you seem to also be oblivious to another important fact that I just want to throw at you before we go to a video clip that I want to show you. It's what about the moral responsibility, though, of Western countries that have contributed to the destabilization of the region, the meddling, the military interventions, not to mention the arms sales that continue as we speak? What about
Do you want me to answer that? Okay, I'll answer that one frankly. Nobody denies, for instance, the disaster of Iraq. But who are the people who intervened most in Syria?
Isn't just Iraq.
Hang on. Let me answer it. Who intervened most in Syria? It wasn't America. It wasn't Britain. It's Iran, Russia. It's, among others, countries, including the one we're in and others
You're
around the
deflecting.
Gulf
before,
here.
Before we got to
Let's
Syria,
face
we
it,
had
that
Iraq, we had Libya, we had many
countries
many
in this
instances.
neck of the woods were much more involved in the Syrian civil war than my country was.
Well, you're also
so do
pouring
you want to
money
take
at
some
it, aren't you?
responsibility for that? Do
I
you
think-
want to
I
take
think-
more
I think
refugees
blame
here
can
in Qatar? Do
certainly
you
can
want to
go
take
around.
more in the Gulf?
No one
Right.
is immune to any sort of criticism.
well,
but we're talking
I'm
about
glad to hear
the
it.
Western countries, the British countries, the British.
What did Britain do in Syria?
We're talking about these governments that you seem to suggest should be immune.
No,
or
when
should
did I
be
suggest that?
absolved of any
When
responsibility.
did I suggest that?
I want to get to the other point that you make, and it's an important one, Douglas Murray. You suggest that we need to actually balance between two very important virtues, two important concepts of mercy toward the refugee and justice toward your own citizens. Let's take a quick look at this instance involving refugees.
Do you send anyone for us? We are the Syrians, about 300.
Sir, I give you the number of Malta authority because you are near Malta.
Hello?
Yes.
About 100 children and 100 women and maybe 100 men. Please hurry. Water is coming into it. The boat is going down. We are dying. 300
Yes, you are.
persons
You
are
have
dying.
called Malta. You have called Malta.
Don't throw us. Captain, run away.
Call Malta. Call
I
Malta.
have no enough account on the mobile. It will cut. Please. You have
Yes.
my number now. You call me, you, please.
That was twice as close to an Italian island as it was to Malta. But again, this idea that, we have to safeguard our values, where does mercy fit in that? Not just mercy, but the obligation, the legal obligations of states towards refugees.
I'd suggest that we all make sure we don't shift responsibility. There is a responsibility to everyone. That would include the state we're standing in now, wouldn't it? It would include all the states in this region. It would include the brother states. It would include the Ummah. It would include everybody. It wouldn't just be the Italians. Now, the Italians, by the way, and let me just finish this point.
That's a valid issue, but let me respond to it,
Let me
because you
finish
mentioned the
the point.
states of the
Because
region. It's a valid issue, but unlike the European
let me
countries,
finish
allow
the
me to
point.
just make this point,
Another
unlike the
point.
European countries,
I'll respond to two points
they
then.
are not parties to the 1951 Refugee Convention. So the legal
Conveniently.
obligations are, well, it's just a fact.
Conveniently, isn't
But
it?
I'll let you carry on. It's
But
a
this
fact.
means that countries that are signatories to the refugee conventions get more blame and more assumption that they are going to have to hold more of the burden than countries that didn't.
They make
And
the
I'm
choice.
suggesting to you that nobody should be able to absolve themselves from blame. But if you go to Italy now, and I don't know when you were last there, but it is not the case that this is going well in Italy, either for the migrants who are arriving or for the Italian population.
Isn't it
You
because
don't
the
see these
resources are
people
not being
coming
poured
up.
into this? Let's face it, the policies are not there, the resources aren't there.
I
It isn't
see
about the
these
overwhelming
people when they
numbers.
arrive. I follow their stories. It is not the case just that they don't. The local populations in Italy have. I've been to Lampedusa. I've seen the boats coming in. The local populations are extremely generous. They are extremely kind to the people. Most of the populations in Europe. Let's just not have this idea that Europeans are somehow incredibly cold-hearted.
No one is
Countries in
suggesting
Europe have
that, but
taken in
just
a
putting
lot
the
of people,
numbers
and they are
into-
trying to deal with a very big problem very swiftly.
Question, please.
Hi, I'm Hamad Abu Hawash. I'm a senior at Georgetown University. And my question is to Mr. Douglas Murray. And before I ask my question, I just want to say, you said no sound bites, but then you said the developing world cannot move to the developed world. I don't know what that's
I think I
about.
said it before.
My question is, since you brought up migration from the developing world, I'd like to ask you this. Every year, the developed world sends about $300 billion of aid to the developing world, but the developing world sends back trillions in debt repayments to the developed world. Now, don't you think that this is the main reason why migrants are moving to Europe? Because money is moving out of the developing world. Wealth is leaving the developing world and moving to the developed world, to build on what Lamont Hill said. Don't you think this is why people are moving to the Western world, to the developed world?
Well, no, I don't. Again, I repeat the fact there are no simple answers. And if it was simply the fact that you could, I don't know, do a debt default or something and solve the whole migration issue, then that would be great. But it just isn't the case. You think that if for instance, all African countries were allowed to default on debt, that they'd become burgeoning, flourishing societies? You think that the problem across, for instance, sub-Saharan Africa isn't just unbelievable greed and theft by politician after politician? You think that if you just wrote off the debt, that would stop being an issue and everyone would become transparent and clean in their dealings with money? I mean, the problems are much deeper than this. They're much deeper than just a simple solution like that. As, if I may just add quickly to the previous two comments, the late, very distinguished American diplomat Daniel Patrick Moynihan had a wonderful rule he came up with, known as Moynihan's Law, where he said that human rights, claims of human rights violations often happen in exactly inverse proportion to human rights violations. That is, you hear about them in the countries that are most free. And before long, you can end up with the presumption that the most free countries are the ones who are most abusive of human rights. And this happens with the case when we talk about our leaders and the ones... It's all very well. We can talk about the Trump administration, we can talk about the democracies and so on for all we like. We can all make criticisms, and we all should. But, okay,
briefly.
Mr. Putin, what are you going to do about him? What are you going to do about the mullahs in Iran? What are you going to do about the House of Saud in Saudi Arabia? You see, what we end up with is this situation. We go, oh, Mr. Trump. We can all do that. Believe me, I can riff on
But
Trump
again, you're being
all
quite
day.
selective, aren't
What
you?
are you going to do about the people you can't do anything about? Are you going to ignore them? Are you going to give them a pass?
Well,
or are you
there's
just going to
something
enjoy
called-
beating
well,
up on the democracy?
I hate to have to interrupt you. There's
So I'm going to talk briefly about, my mother's experience as an immigrant, and I want to touch here on something that Mark Lamont Hill said, this power of education and telling people how refugees fit into the wider context of economic development. Here's why I'm very skeptical about that. Because when my mother arrived in the UK and her parents arrived in the UK, people still called them dirty packies. When she had graduated from Oxford University, she was still a brown person who was not seen as a citizen, right? So to what extent can we really sell this idea that being educated or fitting X, Y, and Z criteria is what you need to do as a refugee for people to humanize you. The inherent problem with these people is that they don't humanize you. You can't fulfill your oppressor's criteria so that they see you as human. So
the
how do you humanize people?
Dehumanizing refugees, thank you very much. And with this, let me go to you, Douglas Murray. Because much of your argument, Douglas, seems to be about the us versus them, the fact that, we have our own values, our own Britishness, our own virtues, and they will come to our shores with their values, their traditions. You seem to almost suggest that they come to your countries with a lesser breed of values.
No, I don't think I said that at any point, and that's another time you've tried to put something in my
Well,
mouth.
So when you
But
talk
I'll
about
add
the
that to
difference
the
in
list.
values, what do you suggest?
Look, first of all, I didn't say that. I said that there are challenges because we do know that there are challenges, and let's just be frank about this. I mean, for instance, I've been in the Gulf for the last week or so. I see more burqas in my home city of London than I have seen in the Gulf in recent days, certainly here in Doha. Now, I can't say I'm delighted by the sight of more and more burqas in London. Do I feel any hatred of the people who wear them? Of course not. Of course not. But I can't say I'm elated by it. And definitely there are times I think, what percentage of burqas in this area becomes like not that pleasant for everyone else?
But again, is it all down to burqas? Because again, you're not asking people with other traditions whether they care about the sight of people drinking alcohol or showing up in bikinis. Again, it's a very
we could in Britain
Western-centric viewpoint.
I'm not. I have to say, you're going to bark up the wrong tree if you think you're going to persuade a Brit that we should stop drinking alcohol because of people arriving in our country. I mean, that's not going to happen. These things are all a bit of give and
you
take.
bring your own traditions that don't quite fit with theirs.
Well,
they don't.
Yeah, there are, as I said, and before we got all confrontational, which you did from the get-go, I said what the problem is here is that these things are all rubbing against each other. And in that situation, you have to work out what things you're willing to give up, which things you're willing to compromise on, and which ones you're not. You're not going to persuade the Brits to massively change their culture, but let me just make the point. Every single society has certain aspects of it it doesn't want to give up. This one will. In Qatar, this one will. Everyone does. So please don't try to make this a kind of bigoted European thing.
Which of your
That would be a
values are
very,
you most
very
afraid
dishonest
to
way to.
lose?
That would be a very dishonest way to
Just
represent
answer this question
debate.
directly if you can. Which of your values are you most afraid to lose? Which ones are most threatened by
Freedom
the
of
arrival
speech.
of refugees?
Freedom of speech. It's the first one. Oh, you think that's not a problem?
I mean,
You think that's not a problem?
But
you
I'll
think,
let you
sorry,
take it
no,
on.
no, no. Let
No,
me,
it's
let
absolutely-
me,
I
let me
think it's-
pick up on that. Let me pick up on that. It's
What about the
very
values of
easy to
tolerance, the
snigger.
values
It's
of-
very easy to snigger about this until you've had friends shot in a newspaper office. It's very easy to laugh about that until it's happened to people you know.
Is there an over-exaggeration, Douglas, do you think, in the West, this fear of Islam or anything that looks so different to us?
No, I mean, the society I'm from is one of the most pluralistic and diverse societies on earth. You couldn't get a larger range of people of different backgrounds and ethnicities and languages than you have in Britain.
And
Which
it's a
is
rich
why,
country.
once again, if I may push back against this thing you are pushing, which is that these are sort of uniquely bigoted, unwelcoming societies.
Not at all.
The evidence on this part of the stage would suggest that Britain is not,
If
for
anything, I'm
instance.
giving you the
So-
chance to tell us, from your
so-
perspective, what you find threatening or not about refugees
I'd
coming
suggest,
to England.
Let me answer that by broadening it, if I may. My suggestion would be, if we're to arrive at any kind of common understanding on this, is that we agree that, for instance, where there are people who pretend that everyone who arrives is a terrorist is barking mad. Okay? We can agree with that, but don't laugh at people with serious concerns about serious security concerns either. Because,
what?
Well, because, you know, we had this in 2015 when certain officials in Europe said the likelihood that anyone coming on the boats among the 1.5 million people who arrived in Germany are going to be violent in any way is total, xenophobic fantasy. And everyone laughed until people started letting off bombs, until, like in Ansbach in Germany, they just had a suicide bombing outside a wine bar. And it just stopped being quite so funny. So all I'm saying to you is, you can agree with me that people who say that most people arriving are going to be violent are ridiculous. Yes, but also don't claim it's ridiculous for people to have serious and sincere concerns about what is happening. Because if you do, there's no way anyone's going
And
to
that
arrive.
is the reality, absolutely, Mark. Douglas Murray, we've been saying that governments have failed, policies have failed. On an individual level, what can we do? What will you do differently, thinking about this issue?
Firstly, by the way, migrants versus expats, there's a very clear reason. It's expected, rightly or wrongly, that expats don't stay in the country and bring up their families and stay for generations. The assumption with migrants is, currently has been in recent generations, that they are going to stay and that it's going to be a multi-generational thing. That's the assumption.
So
but it's an interesting and important thing. Very quickly, just on the integration thing, I repeat, I think we've got to be very, very careful that we don't end up lambasting the freest and most generous countries. And I would just urge, as a call to, as it were, moral caution on this, urge you in this room and people watching, how many people have you made citizens of Qatar from Syria? How many? Okay, it's something worth thinking about, isn't it?
All right.
My goodness, bro. I was waiting for him to do that, man. I was literally going to end this video by saying, how many people in Egypt have let the Palestinians in from the Gaza Strip to escape the war? How many Jordanians have opened up their border for the Palestinians inside of the Gaza Strip to escape the war? How many people in Iran with the IRGC who funds Hamas have opened up their borders to let the Palestinians inside of the Gaza Strip escape the war? How many Lebanese has Hezbollah? How many Houthi rebels in Yemen? How many militia groups in Iraq? How many of them have opened up their borders to let the Palestinians inside of this Gaza Strip escape the war? How many of their Muslim brothers and sisters have opened up their doors for their own brothers and sisters during a genocide, during a war? If it is a genocide, and if these immigrants coming into these places aren't going to cause any problems, the doors should have been opened October 7th in the morning. There is absolutely a statistical absolutely a statistical pattern of radical immigrants who are entering countries, and you are seeing it right now. What is going to happen to New York City? There was a swastika drawn on a synagogue this morning. Today's November 5th, 2025, less than 24 hours after Mamdani got elected mayor. This is just the beginning. And it is not just for the Jewish community. I don't want to say this, but I'm saying it because I think it is absolutely realistic. I'm knocking on wood here. I think churches in the Christian community should fucking wake up right now. Douglas is sharp, man. If you really enjoyed this video, please share. Links in the description below to help support this channel. Here's a note from me. Here are 4 ways you can help us grow if you believe in our mission. On Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal, you can directly contribute to helping this message grow and reach more people across the world. If you want to join the inner circle, join our Patreon with different tiers, and of course, our Discord community, which is free with people from all across the world. The links to every single one are in the description. And last but not least, to the other Barak community, I love you. Ani ohev otchem. I'll see you guys next time.